Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of the Furidashi podcast. And on this final episode, we will be discussing the final entry in the series Metal Gear Solid, and thus also the final entry in the entire Metal Gear series. After which, this podcast will actually, no, we're going to end, and then we're going to have another ending, and then we're going to have another ending, because that's apparently what this game decided to do. Hi, Lauren. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. I was going, what? This is the end? Is this really the ending? I swore there was another ending looking out from us on the horizon.
Oh, we have plenty more endings.
Yeah, maybe the ending that will be ended forever. For Metal Gear 4. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Ash. I'm here with, as you heard, the lovely Nicholas. We're really excited, and by we, I might just be myself, to talk about Metal Gear Solid Phantom Pain, which is also now not 5, it's V, and it wasn't
Metal
5
Gear Solid
to begin with.
Yeah.
V. So, Metal MGSV. What does the V even stand for? Victory?
Vengeance. It could stand or Venom, because he's Venom Snake.
Venom
or it's
Snake.
like V for Vendetta, which is a movie that came out shortly before the production of this game. I wonder if that's an illusion. Probably is. Does it mean anything? Who knows?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Anyway, no, I am. I'm excited because I think this is a game that kind of gets very like polar reactions from the community. I've heard when I asked my friends, I was talking to a lot of people that loved the Metal Gear Solid games, which I didn't know, but they were asking what I was doing. And I was like, oh, I'm playing Phantom Pain. And I literally got simultaneously the two responses from both of them in kind of the reverse order. At the same time, they both say, the combat is bad, the combat is good, the story is shit. Like, at the same time, and I just got this just overwhelming. And then they went, oh, what? Did you say the... And then they said, the story was shit, the combat was great. And so it was really interesting because I think that it kind of is the consensus. And I would say the consensus of, you know, the online algorithm, that kind of the story is what either some people love it, like maybe 3%, but the majority say that it's kind of all over the place, which I think fair. And the other assessments, right, is I think the majority of players do say that the combat is really good, while others find the combat incredibly frustrating because for players like myself, there's no real good, I was going to say fallback mechanic, Nicholas, because for some reason the word escaped me, but there's no recovery, There's not a good recovery mechanic.
Aside from running away, no, there's not. So yeah, like, I mean, I would generally agree with that assessment. And although what I found a little perplexing in reading a lot of like the contemporaneous reviews from 2015 is that they too would actually point out that the story is kind of a mess and then be like 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And I would just kind of go, what? How do you get from, like the story makes no sense and it's kind of a jumble and the missions are awkwardly arranged. It's actually perfect.
Well,
all right, sure.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really excited to talk about this for the themes, because like as I started playing the game and as I started really like trying to dig into the meaning, it was really interesting to me just how literal so much of the game's dialogue was, and yet how so abstract and cerebral what was actually being spoken was. And
It often felt like characters were like essentially delivering monologues at each other rather than actually like interacting and communicating and having conversations and conflicts.
Every single dialogue line felt like exposition. It felt like a bad guy monologuing, or you were just hearing information for the first time. And what was so kind of I don't know, indicative is it felt almost maybe like a 90s movie where you're learning what vampires are for the first time.
Yeah. Kate Beckinsale is like giving the vampire exposition in her tight vinyl suit.
Yes.
And she's like, vampires are actually a genetic race. And you're like, okay.
Yes, that's exactly what it felt like. And like, I don't know, I am super into that shit. Like, I was very much like, oh my god, put me on a tight vinyl suit on top of a rooftop, baby. Let me tell you what I can do. Like, that was 100%. I was that kid, right?
She is very hot in that movie. That is true.
I mean,
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and who doesn't want a hot werewolf boyfriend? Come on. Right, like, you know, / hybrid, whatever.
I don't know. It's Michael
spoilers,
Sheen,
I
though.
guess.
Like,
no, he was not
weirdo.
attractive to me, and she killed the attractive ones. And then, you know, the movie kept going on, and then something about lycanthropy babies. If anyone's seen Underworld 4, okay, we're actually here to talk about a different crazy franchise. But you know, hit me up on my DMs if you want to hear about all my lore there.
Okay.
What I would say is, so when we're kind of introing this, right? That's the consensus, Nicholas. And I think for me, I'm going to go ahead and give a spoiler warning right out the front here. The game has been around quite a while. But I just have to say that, like, I'm not avoiding spoilers here because so much of the arguments and the thesis and the kind of frustrations we have about this series really all do boil down to this spoiler warning that we are going to be talking about not only the ending of this game, but the ending of all kind of games of the series, of the franchise in the future.
Yeah.
And I think it's because this game itself was kind of that farewell, tip of the hat, ride into the sunset, cowboy, man, you know, sort of.
Or it was
approach.
trying to be. It was definitely trying to be.
It was definitely trying to be. Yeah. And if without that spoiler warning, and so that the spoiler warning is we're going to spoil all of Metal Gear / Metal Gear Solid / Metal Gear Solid V / the Phantom Pains, the limbs of the existence, the eternal existential crises we have had this past year and a half.
Oh, Lauren, did you know that the phantom pain is a metaphor, like a phantom limb? Did you know that?
You know, if you hadn't literally told me that in literal dialogue in English.
Yeah.
I hate. So here we go. With that in mind, I've kind of talked about this. Things that we'll talk about are etymologies, such as, like, you know, the Davidic Psalms in the Bible, to also, you know, homoerotic tensions in Kojima's work. So look forward to a very exciting episode brought to you by us at the Furudashi here for you. And to kind of kick us off, I'm actually going to talk to Nicholas, or kind of hand the mic now over to Nicholas.
Okay. So I put together a thesis about both this game and really, like, the Metal Gear Solid, actually the Metal Gear series. Well, maybe just the Metal Gear Solid games, because I do actually think there is an inflection point there. That, you know, there are many ways in which these games try to present themselves as being about identity, the identity of these characters, or the identity of, like, Snake as a kind of, like, signifier that many people can occupy, or Big Boss as a signifier that different people can occupy. And that is sort of like what it's about, and, like, who are you in relationship to all of these, like, you know, world events and to, like, the events of the game. But the thing is, like, I actually think that is merely a facet of something that is much more fundamental about the games that I don't even think that Kojima himself probably would have identified, which is that the game really felt to me like it's about alienation. And I think that both sort of produces the series' virtues and a lot of its faults at the same time. And when I say alienation, it's about, like, because the thing is, as we talked about in the very first episode of this season, Kojima sees his creative process as about trying to create these sort of, like, meaningful connections to, like, other forms of media, and then also through media to other people. But then when I sat down and I played this game, I felt so put off by it at all times. And also the fact that, like, characters in this game don't really relate to each other. They're always kind of talking past each other. And, like, you know, when you think about sort of like what the gameplay itself, like what the combat mechanics are telling you, the combat mechanics are telling you that you are fundamentally alone. I mean, you have all of these soldiers, you have all these mercenaries who are working for you, but they don't go on missions with you, aside from Quiet. and we'll get to her, in a bit. So, like, this whole time, you're essentially, like, the game is telling you through its mechanics that you are a loner and that you are kind of, like, separate from what's going on around you. And there's a mission that's pretty late in the game where you have to try and, like, deal with the vocal parasite contagion that has sort of, like, reemerged in one of the final missions. And you go into this, like, quarantine section of the platform, and you basically, like, the game is trying to make you think about sort of what it means to kill off your own men as a way to, like, prevent this parasite from spreading to everybody else. But at the same time, it's like, when, in many ways, it's presenting the sort of the proposition. It's like, don't you feel bad about yourself that you have to kill your own men? And my honest answer is no, because, like, these weren't people to me. These weren't characters I interacted with. They weren't, like, individuals that within the context of the game I had really invested anything in. They were just random guys. And then I'm like, okay, I have to put them down. And, oh, that makes me a demon. And at the end of that, I was just like, okay, but the thing is, I've kind of always been isolated from these other characters, these soldiers that I've, like, recruited throughout the game. I haven't really had a meaningful connection to them. And then that sort of got me thinking about, all of the other installments that we have played so far. And the way in which, like, the stealth combat sort of, like, hybrid mechanics are presented in this game, in these games really, are always, like, putting you in this position of being fundamentally alienated from what's going on around you. And it plays on your lack of knowledge, your lack of understanding. And that to me really feels like the core. And it's kind of an unsettling core, because I also don't think it's an intentional one.
Yeah, I think I'm really curious to kind of dig into kind of that loneliness and isolation, because, something earlier we've mentioned on the podcast was, and I say that the entire podcast from the series, is that I feel like last September we were talking about, the creative gene. And I think a lot of that transference and his idea for wanting to kind of make an impact on the world really comes from his own, both, say, like, alienation within his own home country in the terms of the loneliness he felt growing up, but also his kind of self-imposed isolation. And I'm not sure if he ever says that in the text itself, in his, like, essays, but a lot of it, actually, I think he does.
He doesn't say it about himself. There is a chapter that we didn't talk about, which is about Kamen Rider, and Kojima talks about.
Yes.
He talks about taking his son to this Kamen Rider exhibit, and, like, his own feelings of nostalgia about, like, the original Kamen Riders, because much like Batman, it's sort of a character that, like, different people have occupied over time. And he talks about the original Kamen Rider and how his heroism and his ability to be sort of this, like, champion of the people stems directly from his isolation. This is a point that Kojima dwells on at length in an essay that's actually pretty short. And so even though he's not talking about himself explicitly, it's hard not to see his own affection for this character and his own appreciation for this character, and the way in which it very clearly mirrors, like, his own personal home life. I don't necessarily think he would see himself as heroic, but
I
there's
think
definitely
he wants to
connection.
be. I think Kojima wants to be heroic. I think he wants to be that hero. I mean, you don't create a book and call it a book, and it's really just republications of your essays that you've already written about, and you start it with, this is my magnum opus of me giving my life to you. Like, that is heroic language, right? That is self-aggrandizing language.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this with all of the, like, tell the truth with love, like, I'm saying this all the love in my heart. Because it's like that is what he is doing, right? And at the end of the day, I think it's almost like, who doesn't want to be a hero? Like, that's the question mark that I'm leaving with when we see in Metal Gear Solid Phantom Pain particularly, because I think that literally, once again, in the, like, hero points, right, it's your heroism, right? Like, I'm so glad you used the common writer example, because that's exactly what I was thinking of when I thought of the hero points. Is that like every actions you take, you can get minus heroism and plus heroism. And so while in the context of maybe the real world, I would say the characters aren't like relatable in terms of the units that you kind of employ / like balloon up. My favorite mechanic is ballooning up people.
The Fulton extraction.
Thank you, Fulton extraction. No, it is hot air balloon and men up. And
yeah, okay. I agree.
Right?
I get what you're saying.
And it's so super, super fun. Everyone should play this game just for that. I was like, yes! Like, I literally just like stealth. That's my favorite stealth mission. Was I just stealthed, I like knocked out someone and folded everyone up, and then I absolutely created an alarm because they're like, our men are being taken. I was like, yeah, they are.
Yes, they are. They really are.
Because they physically are. Anyway, we'll get to my metaphor there later. But I just think that the notion of common writer, the notion of heroism, is that while I would agree with your self argument, you're saying like you didn't feel anything, right, for those men, is that in the UI you get minus heroism. And so there's this interest in the games world that even if you, the player, don't feel that way, and maybe even if a snake doesn't feel that way, there's like this perception of snakes, right, actions, that even when your men aren't there, they would feel a certain way because someone somewhere is judging your heroism, even if it's also just Ocelot with a clipboard.
But the negative heroism also felt kind of arbitrary to me, because it was like whenever it happened, whenever it comes up on the screen, it would be like minus 10 heroism. I'd be like, okay, but why? Like, because I was noticed?
Yeah, because
Seriously?
but during that moment, during the moment of where you have to kill your men, it's like minus 150. Like, it's quite a large number.
It is a large number, yeah. And also, I should note that also there is a secret, like, hidden point system that I only learned about basically because in order to finish the game, I ended up modding it. There's this thing called demon points, apparently, for, like, certain egregiously bad actions that you take in the game, that if you get enough of them, then, like, the shard on your head will like literally grow into kind of like a demon horn shape.
Yeah, so I was watching. So what I ended up having to do, for just so everyone on air kind of knows, is that I really was struggling with this game's combat system. And for me, combat was like a mix of wearing the chicken hat or seeing how far I could go without wearing the chicken hat. I actually quite like stealth games, but there wasn't enough of a recovery mechanic for me to actually really make use, I think, of everything. Also, the worse you are at stealth and completing these missions, the less personnel you have and the less diamonds and like gold, like GMP points.
Yeah, you basically have to do the stealth mechanics. So you're not really,
So then the worse you are, the less developmental resources you have. Hey, you have to develop Mother Base to develop your arsenal to be good at the combat. And then you are now lacking in resources. You're lacking in it. So basically, you can only chicken hat so far. And I totally understand and respect that decision as a game developer, personally. But my God, like, I really, really couldn't get through the combat. I was the chicken. And so because of that, I ended up watching a player who got a ton of demon points because the shard in their head by the end of this, like, all playthrough cutscenes was just, like, massive. And there's more on that later when we talk about the true ending. But I do think that kind of notion of, if I was the narrative director on a game like this and was told, hey, we're going to ape some old 80s and 90s where characters talk past each other and everyone's a lonely American hero, like, it felt in the cutscenes, like the direction, like it was aping, right? Like these old movies and almost like old comic book inspired movies, as I would say, versus like a comic derivative
Well, in many
movie.
ways, like the old Lee, what's his name? The guy from The Dirty Dozen, Lee Gardner, I think is his name. The guy who's like a very stoic character who is in all these like war films and also in a lot of. I thought
you were going to say like, League 60s... of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and I was like,
no,
get
like
my fun movies out of here.
Well, because one of Kojima's favorite films is The Great Escape, which actually stars Steve McQueen, who's like, one of the greatest like action stars of the '60s, and I think he definitely has that sort of model of like the stoic, heroic figure in his head, especially given the fact that like there, when you compare how much like Venom Snake says in this game versus say like how much Ocelot or, Miller says in this game, actually, Kiefer Sutherland doesn't really have a whole lot of work to do here.
Yes, and I think so. Let's actually talk about that as well, because I think that what's really interesting here is that there was a mechanic made for the game, or I say it was made for the game, but there's this mechanic of the parasite. Now, the parasite is something that is like super hyper contentious because it's also why Quiet gets her name, and so this will be a nice little segue. Okay, sorry. This will be a nice little segue. Let's just talk about the theme, Lauren. Okay. And that the parasite itself is pretty much lung cancer, and it adheres to your lungs. It's attuned to a language, and the guy that ends up monologuing to these to you is called Code Talker, and which we're gonna subside. Let's just say this character is not. It definitely felt like a character that was aped from these old-time American movies, definitely in the 50s or 60s, that absolutely aped a different culture and then brought it in, but like a white man played it, and then he's like, this older guy that's seeing with the spirits,
I can tell you an interesting story. Do you know why it was sort of like a commonplace thing for people jumping out of a plane to yell Geronimo? It's because the literal guy, Geronimo, the Apache, was held in a federal prison that was on the same base as, I believe it was the 101st Airborne Division. And so, like, he was literally there, and the guys would go, like, talk to him. And so it became a kind of thing that they would do whenever they were doing, like, jumps, to yell his name as they were jumping out of the plane. So there is this weird connection. But also it's worth noting that guy was a prisoner of the United States. Like he wasn't just some like guy who was hanging out and being like the old wise like native dude. Like no, he was a prisoner because he had actually tried to fight. So this is a really
interesting story because that's what I was going to, because I think that's exactly kind of what I'm trying to get out here, is that this weird theme of the parasite that infests your lungs because it's attuned to the English language specifically is also not originally, but has been. So that's kind of the twist of the game for the spoiler.
But Quiet's version has,
that the Quiet's version is attuned to the English version because everybody on his base speaks English, right? And I think that it comes through the knowledge, the twist that Quiet's version is the English version, that this parasite is kind of the huge thing that was killing his own men. That it was like an epidemic that kind of created the whole, what I would call the twist / like climax of the game. Not quite the actual climax, to be fair.
Well, there are like multiple
because there's multiples, right? But like this kind of big moment with Quiet's character is then revealed in a different language, and the language. And I actually was it Russian? This is terrible of me because I did not think they were speaking it.
No, I think she ends up speaking Lenape. It's some native language.
Okay, so speaking a language that's not Russian or English is what you've kind of heard throughout the game.
But I don't think it is.
And it's also the language spoken by this what you would call kind of native inspired, terrible. Man.
I think he is Navajo. I'm pretty sure he's Navajo.
Okay, thank you. I was like, is he actually Navajo?
Because
so this is the problem. I watched these. I did not play. And also in a Kojima game, I have to be honest, there's a lot of kind of like aping / inspiration from these older movies that also don't really quite tell you. You expect to know. And I'm not quite sure I like the textual assumptions and expectations. So the whole point of kind of my theme, just argument here, to kind of just get it out before we kind of lay out kind of the facts so we can break it down.
Code Talker is Dine, which is what we would commonly know as the Navajo.
Great. No, I love that. So that's the facts there, is to kind of understand that this parasite that targets the English language, particularly revolving around Quiet's character, and then a close-up and reveal through the Navajo language, which she is able to speak, is that it's all about how she will never speak English. And you have this kind of, so that the idea, right, is that so she doesn't die, but also so that nobody else on the base gets infected with it. We also kind of see the introduction of this parasite specifically being tuned towards English, which is kind of a twist of what it was supposed to be, right? Is through the Navajo, and then he has like Snake gets to smoke the pipe, right? And it's it's bought you some time. And so I'm kind of like layering all these cutscenes on together, because that's why I said is like, hey, I'm going to spoil basically every kind of scene and moment of this, is because in order as a whole kind of like philosophical statement is that I'm so curious and it gets lost in gameplay. But when you watch it as a
Yeah.
movie, you get to see these layers that I kind of recognize that there's kind of this argument being made for why are people, right, needing to speak English. That's like the first thing. And then it literally comes up on the screen as like only 4% of the world are native English speakers, but the entire world has to speak English, is like a kind of in your face kind of punch. And also, though, the idea that like Quiet is trying to say she will never speak English. One is you could say, oh, it's just protect the base. But I think two, in kind of contrast with all of the other themes, is also like a Kojima's argument, or is an attempt at this argument. And this is why I say attempt, because I'm not sure if the intentionality is either there or never came through, particularly because it's Quiet's character. Is that what is the nature of having a shared language?
Yeah.
Especially in the military where there are lots of different types of terminology, but then also the notion that since there are so many languages that could have been spoken, because very early on they're like, hey, you can't understand the Russian, so you need to get a Russian translator. Like, it feels like there's this argument trying to be made that the Parasite, specifically to be tuned against English, I feel like there's an argument that can be made there.
Because Skullface, the big baddie of the game, like, he wants to essentially like wipe out native English speakers. From what I understood, because I think the point is actually even a little confused as presented, basically as a way to sort of like deal with the kind of the hegemony of the Anglophone sphere. And so like he's sort of in like an anarchist, but in the destructive sense, not in the like communist sense. And he's actually an anarchist in much the same way that Liquid Ocelot ends up being in Metal Gear Solid 4. So that sort of aspect of it is purely destructive, and it's meant to be entirely about like, okay, well, there is this sort of like military industrial complex. I'm being very generous because this is me extrapolating an argument that kind of isn't really made in the game. But if you take the sort of, I guess you could say, the indications to their logical conclusion, the idea is that in order to disrupt that primarily Anglophone, like military industrial complex, you need to deal with all of the people who perpetuate it, who are themselves native English speakers. And by doing that, then you sort of like restore a kind of like multipolar world where like individual nations vie according to terms that would be sort of like pre-Westphalian for all of you history nerds out there. Again, I don't think that argument is actually made in the game. It's more sort of like winked at, if anything. But also, like, to your point about language, also, a lot of the earlier missions that you have to do are specifically about exfiltrating someone who will serve as a translator for the respective languages that are used in the game. So predominantly, like, Russian and Afrikaans are the two that you sort of encounter most often, but also you encounter some, a variety of Central African languages as well, because a lot of the game takes place in the on the borders of Zaire. And so that's actually really kind of interesting, this idea that sort of like then the Diamond Dogs, which is this mercenary group that Venom Snake / Big Boss is putting together, is sort of like fundamentally internationalist in its orientation. And you even see that sort of like at the upper echelons of the group itself, because yes, Big Boss is an American, but Miller is half Japanese, and then Ocelot is actually Russian. If you guys remember, our discussion of Metal Gear Solid 3, the character is originally Russian. And then throughout the game, as you like capture guys and indoctrinate them and they become part of your mercenary outfit, they come from all different cultural backgrounds and, linguistic backgrounds as well. And so then the idea is that this like force that you've put together is one that is a kind of melting pot, and I use that term very specifically, of like the various soldiers of the world who, according to the ideology that Big Boss is propagating, have been kind of like abandoned by their respective governments. And then the whole ideology of outer heaven is meant to be a way to sort of like get, in many ways, to sort of then Mother Base becomes that kind of like mercenary outfit / refugee camp for soldiers. If I understand sort of like the logic of what's going on.
And I think exactly like that's kind of like the language issue is kind of like something that for me, I feel like we're going to see this more than in Death Stranding. And the reason why I'm also like positing that is kind of like the big question that I actually got from Skullface. And I thank you for telling me about like he actually mentioned like he wanted to destroy everyone with the English language, because I have to be real with you guys that I was just like, you are expositioning dumping what the game is supposed to be telling me. And I felt
click through.
It was literally, I felt like everybody was doing that. I felt like everybody was doing that. The only person I want to listen to is Ocelot. Okay, he's my homeboy. But no. And I think that what's interesting here is that's like, what is America? And that was kind of the question posited by Skullface, and I say posited. But when you mentioned everybody's talking to Snake, and why kind of like your thesis is about alienation and isolation, is that something that America consistently is having to go through as a country is like, we must isolate ourselves from the world.
Oh,
and like,
God. Yeah.
Right? And we're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into that. But I have to mention it. And I mention it once again with kind of humor and satire, is because I think that, you know, for all intents and purposes, there's other arguments and other themes that come through in this game. And I really emphasize the themes here because where we've talked about, Nicholas has said it's all about identity and who are you, as I think in this game, that entirely breaks apart. And it's not even about like, who are you anymore? And it's kind of about, that kind of gets shoved aside until the very, very end, where it's more about like, what are you? Like, what is America? What is Diamond Dogs, right? What are these things? Is it an assemblage of pieces, right?
That is a good point, because one of the things that I think, you know, when you're talking about themes, a theme of this podcast over the past like half a year has been this idea that like, okay, these characters aren't like particular individuals with personal histories necessarily. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But what is more important is the kind of like position that they occupy within a kind of like constellation of individuals. And I say a constellation of individuals because to me, that's really sort of like where the alienation comes from, is that like not only are characters often speaking like at each other rather than to or with each other, but also the fact that like even the individual subject positions themselves could be fundamentally different people at, you know, any given time. And in fact, that is the big reveal of this game, that the big boss, the guy that we are with this entire game, is a different guy. It's like he's not the same guy.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I feel like, well, I guess mentioned it early is what I'm trying to say. I was like, are we going to say that for the end? And in my head, I didn't tell this.
We might as well just get it out of the way.
Let's get it out of the way, yeah. Because like for me, I hate that I'm going to say this. I loved that. I was like, oh yeah, fuck you. Like, yep, slap the player in the face. Like, that's what it is. It's a slap in the player's face. Like, every time I see this kind of metaphor, and like, I'm going to get, dare I say it, theoretical here, is it always brings me back to that amazing, beautiful essays and arguments in early academia about the player versus the avatar. Who they're controlling in the game.
Okay, this is not a video podcast, so you guys didn't get to see Lauren's very dramatic gesture. It was choice, but that was just for me. Yeah.
It was just for Nicholas. If any of you ever come into our lives and we ever do a live session or we get invited to a panel or something, which we absolutely should do a panel, I have to say that like the avatar argument is all about who, and you have to say it like that, everybody. Say it with me now. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Avatar.
The avatar.
Thank you. You have to say it like that because like reading these essays for my game design degree was just like so fun and yet joyful in a satirical way. Like I laughed out of amusement as a player. And I say that with love in my heart because I absolutely loved reading them for real. Like it made me realize that people truly who do not play games think of these characters in a way that is like, I'm putting on a second skin suit. Right? And that's why I'm saying it works so well for this game because it's like that is literally what he is saying is happening. And when I say literally he's saying, in a cinematic, you are literally putting on the skin of Snake, a snake skin, if you will. Sorry.
Oh,
because you.
Is that a metaphor, Lauren?
It's a very bad metaphor, like the other bad metaphors in this game.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you are a solid snake. You are disposable. You are replaceable. You're not special. And
I don't know. I disagree with that, but please go ahead. Make a point.
Thank you. You can definitely disagree with me, and I think you should, because that, at the end of the day, when you make an argument that, hey, by the way, like, the player is the character, you were Snake all along, it's like, that reduces my investment and my emotional attachment in a way from, say, the character or the avatar, that it's like, no, I'm not this guy because I would not have taken any of the actions I just saw him take. But also, I created the appearance of the medic at the very beginning of the game, and that's who he is at the end of the game, reflected in the mirror. But then you break that mirror / Snake, the character that you've been playing, / the not Big Boss, aka we have Big Boss, Ocelot's boyfriend, and we have the character in this game, fake Big Boss, not Ocelot's boyfriend.
Well, why don't we call him Venom Snake?
Venom Snake. So we have Venom Snake, and we have original Snake, Ocelot's boyfriend, Big Boss. So
the original Big Boss is Naked Snake.
Naked Snake.
New Big Boss is Venom Snake.
Naked Snake because he doesn't have a skin. I just think my snake skin argument comes through. It's a bad metaphor, like all the other bad metaphors.
He was also never naked in Metal Gear Solid 3, which was very disappointing to me.
It was very well, we don't know. Maybe Ocelot knows what I'm saying. Anyway, let's move on. We'll get back to my obsession with Ocelot later.
Speaking of mostly naked characters, let's talk about Quiet.
Yes, so let's actually move there. And just to wrap up that argument, though, is that Nicholas, just so we're clear, I think that's why it becomes a slap in the face, because you are not right. You're not Venom Snake is all I'm trying to say.
Okay. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. And I think for someone who would have been more emotionally invested in this series than I am, because listener, as you know, I've become more and more disillusioned as we've progressed through these games. For me, the big reveal. So, okay, actually, let me explain how you actually find this out. So there is a prologue mission to the game that I think is probably the most well-designed mission in any Metal Gear Solid game, period. And then it kind of falls off after that. But the way in which sort of the gameplay is telling, it has a kind of narrative purpose, and is telling you a very specific kind of story. It's showing you these powerful bad guys that you have to regard in a variety of different ways because of the way you recognize who they are and what they are doing. That is really well done. And through the course of that, basically at the beginning of the game, you wake up in a hospital 9 years after the end of the events in Ground Zeroes, when the original Mother Base is attacked by XOF and is mostly destroyed. And so you've been really hurt, and then a Greek doctor comes in. He's like, "Hello, snotty." Sorry, I'm not going to do a Greek accent. Anyway, but he explains to you you got all this shrapnel in your body, and then later that night, a woman who we later learn is Quiet attacks you. And you are defended by another patient at the same hospital whose face is entirely wrapped up, and so you can't actually see who they are. And then the two of you work together to escape the hospital, avoid the big fiery Russian guy who is Volgin from MGS3. And, eventually you get in an ambulance, you drive away. There's a bizarre, but I actually think kind of fantastic, horse chase scene. And then you eventually, because you meet up with Ocelot pulls you up on the back of a horse. You have to shoot the big fiery Russian with a shotgun as you and Ocelot ride off into the twilight together.
Oh my god, it was very beautiful. It was an amazing prologue. Beautiful. Everything was great. And then the final mission, and then the final mission of the game, you play the prologue again, but this time with certain differences. One of them, as Lauren has already alluded to, was seeing in the mirror the character that you created at the beginning of the game as the new face that supposedly Big Boss is going to get the plastic surgery for, so that way people don't recognize him.
that's actually you, and that Big Boss's face is the one that you have surgically applied to you. And the reason for this, because you then sort of like you look at the photographs again, and then you start to realize that you are actually one of the other figures in the photograph, not Big Boss. And then that character is later revealed to be the medic who was on the helicopter when Big Boss, the actual Big Boss, picked up Paz, and you are the one who examined her and determined that the bomb was inside of her abdomen. By the way, with a V-shaped scar when it's removed. V, I wonder if it's a metaphor. You also, okay, I'm gonna set aside the like pause content for a moment because it's deeply upsetting. Anyway, but the point is that you sort of like it's revealed through this sequence of events that like the entire time in that original prologue sequence, that other guy who had his face wrapped in bandages, he was the real Big Boss, and that you are sort of like taking his place as a way to sort of like distract attention from what he is really doing. And the distraction is essentially everything that you do throughout Metal Gear Solid The Phantom Pain.
Yep. And I think so thank you for explaining it. For any listener who hasn't watched The Phantom Pain, really just go watch it. Or played The Phantom Pain. That's kind of what I was talking about right there. And is at the end, you are breaking the mirror after going, thank you, I was able to get another life because of you. And then you actually break the mirror, which is you're breaking the reflection of Big Boss. But it's because you, in your head, always knew you weren't Big Boss, and you are...
Or it's not clear throughout the game that you actually understood that.
It's not clear, but you obviously didn't talk a lot. And if you really know you're not Big Boss and you're just like fucking playing a role, you're just like definitely not gonna say anything. I don't think it's clear that Kaz knows. It's hold on.
It is made explicitly clear that Miller and Ocelot both know. They
do at the very end, but I don't think Kaz knows.
So like the thing that is played at the very end is supposedly a and again, this is not the narrative isn't really told very well. Like that conversation happens as they're about to reestablish Mother Base. So that takes place essentially between the prologue and like the beginning of, and then the rest of the game.
Well, I thought that took place at the end, but it doesn't matter narratively where it happens, because at the end of it, I think that you, like Venom Snake, right, destroying the mirror is you taking on the identity of Snake and of Boss, right? And I think that's why a lot of people still would say that the argument around this kind of topic of how we're saying it's not quite about identity would still try to say it's about identity. And I think this is why the story falls flat, is that like that theme is so lost because it all happens at the end, that while it's a great reveal, and why I as a writer, like I love it anytime someone can try to pull off the whole but it was you all along in a video game, like was it really pulled off effectively?
Well, right? This is why I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, without taking too much time on this topic, because I do want to get to like something that's an etymological quirk that I also find, like, quite frankly, you can become profound in cheap entertainment in a sort of way. And that my thesis would be, this is a game of lost metaphors and lost themes, because it tried to do all of the themes all at once.
Yeah, you're right.
Which means that you can't do any themes. And so without taking too long on this topic, I did want to go back to our original Big Boss for Naked Snake and talking about who else is unfairly naked in this game. Make sure we do our due diligence on that.
I think we may need to go a little bit longer because we do need to talk about Quiet. And
unlike Quiet, we need to talk about Quiet.
Yeah, because like I was talking to Lauren before we started recording, and the one thing that I didn't want to do is make the somewhat like superficial critique, which is that like, yeah, she's basically objectified throughout the entire game. There are so the way the thing that really kind of like was the final nail in the coffin for me was, I was trying to max out my bond level with her so that way I could actually do her final mission, because you can't unless it's maxed out. And so I was looking online for like ways in which to sort of like quickly improve that. And apparently the most effective way to increase it quickly is to stare at her boobs in first-person mode while you're on the helicopter, the ACC. That is one of the most effective ways to increase your bond rating with her. And so I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ. But the thing is, so like there's that. And it's bad. It's very bad. But also, like, I want to look at this, since we were talking a lot about like subject positions. We talked about like the subject position of Big Boss, of Snake. The way in which like Quiet is situated in the game is not even really as a person. Like, she has personal moments, like the moment with the Danae Kotaker, the moments where she like rescues the child soldiers who have gotten themselves into a big old mess on the Mother Base platform. But the thing is, when you think about the way in which she's used in terms of like the gameplay mechanics, she is functionally a piece of equipment. And the reason why I say this is because when you look at how you use her in the systems of the game, she occupies the same position as like the horse, the dog, the little mecha mobile weapons platform. And the way in which you interact with her is the same way in which you interact with those things. And in many ways, there's more human like interaction between Snake and the fucking dog than there is between Snake and Quiet. And in fact, Quiet is often infantilized throughout the entire like game. One of her most human moments is when she's like playing in puddles on the Mother Base platform like a child. And so there is this way in which she is sort of like it's hard for me to sort of like take a lot of what is in many ways like explained to you about her character as any more than just like, I don't know, this woman existing for a man, because what ends up happening is that she never, like, there are ways in which she does actually communicate with you. There's that, like, you know, it's made of, there's a big deal made of the fact that like, oh, well, you know, if she can't talk to you, how's she going to communicate with you on missions? One, it's established that like audio recordings don't actually transmit the parasite, but whatever. I guess we're just going to set that aside because she records a tape at the end. So like she could theoretically talk through like her radio. But the way she ends up communicating with you is by like whenever she has spotted somebody and that she's ready to attack them, she hums this little ditty to you. And it's like, to me, that was a totally missed opportunity because it's like, okay, if you're going to have this character who can't communicate with you in like ordinary spoken language, you could have created an entire system where Quiet communicates things to you through gestures or through like a variety of different songs that she hums to you. But that would have actually required you to be actively interacting with Quiet as a character rather than using her as a form of human equipment, which is kind of what she ends up being.
No, it really is. And I think what's super, super hard for me when I think of like all of my kind of like arguments and all of the themes, that all kind of boils down to this unfortunate like lens of misogyny and or subservience to the player / the male player.
Yeah,
and I
the
have
male
to be,
player.
The male player, I have to point that out. And I have to say that because unlike in other kind of games or genres where I can say, hey, there is some misogyny here, but you can tell that the player feels a bit gender neutral, even if the player is a man body, right? Or you would say a male-oriented character within the game. Like, this is absolutely through the lens of what I would say is a patriarchal and a misogynistic attitude towards the way not just women serve men, but how women structurally serve the plot. Like, her whole arc is really just like, there's like someone better than you out there, Snake. But you can defeat her and then you save her and spare her life. But actually you don't. You can just kill her right there. Like, you can just be like, actually, I don't want to stare at your tits all day. And then you kill her. And then you don't get that content.
Yeah. It's just not there.
It's just not there. So like,
if,
then you
if in Mission 11 you kill her, none of these subsequent things in which she appears happen.
None of them. Like, you actually can just destroy the themes. Which I almost feel like is a more like a better thematic argument of the game, if that makes sense. And I think that like it's this is why I say it comes down to the boiling of the argument of the themes, is that unfortunately like there is this like game that you play with quiet, and with quiet it almost seems like, yes, it is a different story, it's a different subject matter entirely, that unfortunately gets lost then because there's a second game, and that second game is, well, what if the players just kill quiet with the tits? And it's like, oh, well, this is the one about, well, what is America, and like, don't you remember about this parasite, and blah blah, we're not going to have any of this other arguments. And also like there's unnecessary torture of this cute nerd. Like, I'm very upset about unnecessary nerd torture, okay?
Yeah.
Like, he was a bit of a shit, but like, you know what? He's had enough torture in his life.
They kind of resort to torture a little too quickly throughout the game.
Way too quickly. Okay.
It's like, oh, we just met this guy. Well, I guess we got to torture him.
I know, right? And that's the lens of, and I hate saying it's the lens of patriarchy, but it is the lens of like a person that is in power using that position to get things that are subservient, like to get the kind of nations out of them, to get the, not nations, information is what I was trying to say. I was reading my notes here. And I think what's really, really interesting here, and why I talk about things being subservient to plot or subservient to something, is that in the Patreon episode, I think we're going to have to go into Lauren's beautiful metaphor, where we always talk about how the games we make are always somehow inspired, if not influenced, by the development cycle of making the game.
Yeah.
And I think it's incredibly true here, because not only do we have this like secret branching path in a Kojima game, and it's, I mean, it's not secret, but it is kind of secret. Because what male player, once again, the lens of misogyny, would kill the woman with tits? Like, no, right? And if you're a female player and then you do kill her, like, why would you kill her? Because you're not through the lens of misogyny, because you'd want to save the woman, because blah, 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 blah. Anyway, let's move on. And I say let's move on is that we don't have time for me to go down that. But I think what's really, really crazy here is that, like, this dumb, you could say games are dumb entertainment, quote unquote. Yeah. I know they're not, but everybody, like, hear me out. Like, come with me on this journey. But I think these dumb entertainments, right? These kind of dumb entertainment decisions and spectacle, the amazing, like, phoenix coming out of the fire in the beginning, where I was like, I think we're just going to talk about that the entire time. Truly, that's what I told Nicholas when I first started playing the games. I think we're just going to talk about the prologue. It's amazing. The onboarding is great. And now we're not. We're talking about themes. Because there's this one really big boss battle at the end of the game, slash, like, this whole arc, right?
About, wait, which end of the game? Are you talking about the first end of the game or the second end of the game?
I know, right? The kind of the first end of the game, quote unquote, without the quiet, without the actual end of the game. And it's about bringing down Salah-Anthropos. And I have to talk about this because...
Oh, the Salanthropus, yeah.
Yeah, it's Salanthropus. You're right. It's the Salanthropus. Because that's how they say it.
Which is the Metal... We should note is the version of Metal Gear in the game.
Which is just the version of Metal Gear in the game. It looks exactly like Metal Gear. And you're right, Nicholas. Why did I say Salanthropus, you're wondering? Well, because someone who only read subtitles realizes it's two words put together that makes it sound cool like a dinosaur, but it's not. Salah is the Hebrew word that comes up a lot in the Psalms because it means to pause and to reflect, particularly about, say, a song or a spoken word. And that is what Salah means. It means almost reflect on the word of God that I have just spoken, right? Reflect, right? About the praises that I sing, right? So it's Salah. It's almost like a, it's like a cry at the end of it. And Anthropos literally means all of humanity. And I love this because it's not just all of humanity.
Well, it's man in the generic sense.
It's mankind. Like, it's mankind, right? No. I want you to take this out of context. I want you to be like, but Lauren, is that really what this language word means? Is that really what this linguistically would mean? Well, I don't know. You tell me. I'm not a native speaker of these languages, quite like English. Anyway, so this son of man, if you will, in theological sense, anthropos also means like man, son of man, can be used in that context in biblical senses. So I'm saying this because I'm a Bible nerd, everybody. Haha. I'm a language nerd. And the etymology of this, you just throw them together. Salah, I read Salah-Anthropos. I did not hear whatever they said to me. I only saw these two words because I'm so used to studying like the ancient Greek and Hebrew. And I was just dumbfounded because I was like, what an amazing prophetic, profound statement one could have made here. Right? And I think what's great is that, like, I feel there was an intentionality. Like, I felt that there were these two cool words that they're like, man, this game is going to be about like the salvation, and this big boss is coming in. He's saving the children, right? He's assemblaging all of these nations of all cultures to create an outer heaven. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've got the lens of misogyny and actual development hell. And I don't think...
No, but I want to go back to your point there, because it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I really think he's trying to say something. But then I'm like, okay, but what is it? what is the thing that this is communicating to me? Because for me, playing the game, it's like, okay, yeah, it's anthropos because it's kind of like dude shaped, but it also roars like a dinosaur. I shot it with a rocket launcher, and that's kind of my experience of it. And so it's like, but what it means, like what it signifies, is then like, I don't know.
No,
and that's where I'm kind of always left with these games. It's like, yeah, I see you trying to say something, but could you please clarify for me what it is you're trying to say?
And I think that, exactly. And I think that for me, the reason why I say this is a contrast of the themes, the battle of the themes, of which themes wins, is I also kind of believe it's a battle of the directors. It's a battle of the publisher and like what the entertainment and the male gaze and the masses want. And I'm saying all this kind of satirically, to be fair. But like the story and the narrative like are at contrast and in opposition with everything this game is giving to you mechanically, because it has all of this depth that someone researched or someone found. I really don't think it's a coincidence that you've got all of these biblical metaphors, that you yourself are the hero, right, of nations.
Well, yeah, and also like the constant allusions to Moby Dick throughout the entire game.
Yeah, I didn't even go the Moby Dick route because I was like, look, that's been covered, okay? And like, apparently we're not getting to Ocelot and how you can't really ever kill your boyfriend, and that's why he's not the real big boss. We didn't even get to that, but we will in Patreon. So to wrap up this episode from my end of the spectrum, I think we kind of understand that, oh yeah, I wanted to get to it because happy Pride Month. And so everyone there, that if you haven't played this game, unfortunately, it is lacking on Ocelot. My man, he's everywhere. And if you want to follow more Ocelot, follow us on Patreon, where the next episode will really just be Lauren talking about how Ocelot is not only the hero of this game, but the hero of my heart.
Lauren, I have a question. If our dear listener wanted to listen to our Patreon episodes, where would they go?
Oh, they would go to patreon.com/ because I always mix them up, actually. Furidashi. Furidashi. And you would be able to sign up for just $5 a month. You would not only get the dulcet tones of Nicholas, but my erratic and chaotic ones. And you'd get even more dulcet tones of Nicholas in all of the Furidashi Classroom episodes that we recorded for you guys. It truly, truly is amazing. We also would get all your messages directly into our email inbox if you started posting there. It would be fantastic. And if you don't want to go there, you can go to our Blue Skies. I'm at Espresso Cat, and you are
at Academicality.
All right. And with that, I am signing off because I really want to start recording about Ocelot. So, Nicholas, anything you want to leave the rest of this beautiful crew with?
No, I just want to reiterate, happy Pride, everybody. Be gay, do crimes.
Fuck the patriarchy.